Part 2. Isn't Ignorance Bullshit? Chapter 13. The Serpentine Stone. My feet were dripping like paintbrushes when I stepped out of the river to map a new trail across the shoreline. "Look at this," whispered Manuka. Like a spider spinning a midnight web, I watched her hand walk along the timber and sink between the bark where a small hole swallowed her hand. "Ever wonder who created the trees?" asked Manuka. "Have I met you before? What is this feeling? I've never felt a connection like this. Not to strangers," asked Levi. "We've got roots too," whispered Jane. "We all go back to the same original humans. We're all like a bunch of forest lamps walking around in the dark. But your lampshade looks different than mine, and hers is different than his." She was glowing brighter than any of us, and the more she smiled, the more our light grew together. Even the leaves and branches were pointing down to Jane's light. "You're glowing," said Otto. I was waiting for Jane to respond, but Otto tapped me when I turned to him. His eyes were looking into mine. "And what were you doing in that factory so early? Why were you there the morning we met?" asked Otto. I couldn't remember. Nothing beyond this moment mattered. They were all staring at me. "He kept the history," Jane interrupted. "He was a historian destined to tell the truth, and that's why he brought the canvas. All history keepers need a blank sheet. Her words were like her light, and she'd given it to every flower, every stone, and every person she'd ever met." "I do believe things connect for a reason," said Otto. My gaze shifted above Otto when I caught the full moon glowing over the trees. There was light above, and there it is. I pointed. Beneath the moon was a dark triangle protruding through the treetops. Goosebumps echoed over my body like an electric blanket. Each cell of my skin began levitating when I saw the peak of the pyramid hanging in the sky. Without hesitation, Levi took off between the trees like a caged animal on the brink of an escape. Trampling over branches, we chased after him until he reached the top of the mound and fell to his knees. I came to his side when we gazed at the giant pyramid. Bluish-black stones were piled high into the sky. 2 white pillars separated a giant door. It was the only imperfection to this sleek side, and in the front of the door stood the 28th psychopomp with its black and white palms pressed together in prayer. "Ready to become all that you are?" asked the psychopomp. "I am," said Levi. The group was all together when we stepped forward. "Time is but a fabric, and history is how it's sewn. Through this door lies the future, and all it costs is a simple stone," said the psychopomp. "It's made of lapis lazuli. Who molded this stone? This is the stone of royalty," said Jane, touching the pyramid's base. The 28th psychopomp lowered his head from the sky. All of us were aware how the moon was suspended perfectly over the peak of the pyramid. The giant stone door opened and the psychopomp released its palms. "Is there a reason they call you the 28th? Because 28 is a powerful number. It's mystery and strength together," asked Levi. "Mystery? Do you mean destiny and strength?" asked the psychopomp. "Numerology says the sum of numbers represent the whole, and 2 and 8 add up to 1. That's completion. And there's 28 days in a lunar month too. Do you know something about that moon up there?" asked Levi. "That moon is how I do what I am called to be. If you take the proper time to observe, then in time you too shall see," said the psychopomp. The deer extended his palm where Levi set the black stone down before entering through the door and into the darkness. Next, Manuka approached the 28th psychopomp, where the creature extended his white hand. She gave up her white stone before Otto followed her path. Now Jane approached him while I rubbed the rough edges of the black tourmaline one last time as the others disappeared into the abyss waiting inside. On the verge of dropping my stone in its hand, the psychopomp closed the black fist at once and turned to Jane. "Wait! What stone is this?" said the psychopomp. Jane froze. The others were through the door, somewhere inside, when the psychopomp raised her stone up to its white eye and peered into it. Heaving nostrils breathed down on the small greenish-white stone she'd given him. "This isn't the one I gave you," said the psychopomp. "That one is serpentine," said Jane. "You gave me the serpent stone?" it asked. She reached inside her coat into one of her many pockets and revealed the serpentine stone she'd been hiding. "I've never found selenite before, but serpentine is a good stone too," said Jane. "Serpentine is the stone of rebirth. It's not for me to choose who lives and who dies." "Do you know what this is used for?" said the psychopomp. Jane nodded. "Astral travel." "This is how elemental beings make contact. Have they spoken to you?" said the psychopomp. Unsure of what to do, the psychopomp took a moment to rub the stone in its palm between each finger and its thumb. "And so it is written. I shall accept this stone until we meet again," said the psychopomp. "Thank you, and I promise I'll take care of your selenite too," said Jane. The psychopomp reopened his black palm in front of me. As I released the stone, I felt a flicker of white light burst through my forehead. No one saw it, not even I, but supreme clarity came upon me. I took a step inside with Jane, but heard something tumbling down the side of the pyramid from above. I turned when a massive object struck the ground beside the psychopomp's cloak with tremendous force. A human body had fallen, and his skin was mashed in the dirt. Mangled legs were twisted up over his bloodied head, and... "Is it," Jane paused, "is it dead?" "An empty vessel," said the psychopomp. This poor human wasn't moving, and whatever had happened was even worse than trauma. Blood was seeping out of his half-shaven skull, while the man's face remained buried in the dirt. Someone had buzzed the sides of his hair and left a long mess on the top. He was naked, and I didn't dare look any closer, because the longer I looked, the more I saw that there was no light left in this man. "What happened to him?" I asked. Looking up, I heard a door slam somewhere up above on the pyramid's smooth side. "Sometimes we must pass on before we become all that we are," said the psychopomp. The full moon began to inch past the peak of the pyramid as if a clock started the countdown. Not a moment later before the giant doorway began creeping shut on its own as we stood halfway inside. "Go! Your toll has been paid. In is the only way out. Go in with all your heart." The psychopomp pointed towards the door. "They're already inside," said Jane. "I can't see the others anymore. We have to go." Jane pulled me in as the door shut behind us. Tiptoeing ahead in the pitch black, my hands began to reach around, but there was nothing to focus on. All I could picture was the mangled man's body still stuck in my mind. "We have to stick together," said Jane. "Promise?" Chapter 14. The Contract of Life Before Death. No sign of Manuka, Otto, or Levi. No sign of any walls either. There was nothing to see until a light flickered on in the distance where a vast room emerged around a yellow lamp suspended from above. We walked forward until a man in a robe stood under this light. "Peace be with you," he bowed, "and welcome to the house of our Lord." His head was shaved bald except for a small circle of hair in the very back. "We're looking for our friends. They just came in?" The man didn't move. His hands were in the form of prayer while we waited in silence. "Have you seen them?" I asked louder. "Seen who?" asked the man. Jane's hand squeezed mine tight before we stopped. The man in white noticed our hesitation, and now 2 more lights were illuminated above a stone altar. Piles of pages were stacked high on top of it. "No need to fear. I'm the preacher," he said, "and we need to talk about your soul contract. God commands it." "What do you mean, contract?" said Jane. "A contract is a legally binding agreement which recognizes and governs the rights and duties of 2 parties. That's between you and God, and it's all summed up in your contract," said the preacher. Never in all my days had I seen so many pages stacked up high. A few more lights flickered on when a group of short humans wearing gray robes carried a ladder towards the first contract. "Who are they?" said Jane. "God's followers," said the preacher. One of the followers led Jane up the ladder to the very top of her stack. Jane studied the first page. "What's it say?" I asked. "Contract of Adhesion 44981, Transition Plan." "So what's this contract business about?" asked Jane. "If you're going to play the game of life, then it's best you understand the rules," said the preacher. "What kind of rules? And why?" The first rule is most important. No fire allowed inside the pyramid, said the preacher. Now every light flickered on to reveal the cargo bay entrenched behind the lapis lazuli stones. The preacher pointed to the wall where a giant red X was painted over a symbol of an orange flame. Was this an old temple of sorts? Maybe from a foreign land, but it had been modified into a trading hall where merchants would have sold and exchanged goods. Large stone tables showcasing exotic attire, rugs, jewelry, and other precious stones were arranged on each table, but not a single merchant was here. The table nearest me held a variety of tapestries, and behind that was a collection of masks. All around, on every slab, were historical artifacts preserved from a lost world, and so many of them? Not one item was the same. Each and every object was unique or handcrafted. Sign the contract and you can take whatever you'd like, said the preacher. Well, I'm in, said Jane. Where do I sign? The preacher pointed to the bottom of her stack. Without looking at another page, Jane climbed down the ladder and signed the very last page. Then the follower scuttled the ladder in front of my stack. You're not going to read any of it. She rolled her eyes at me. I saw Merlinite back there. Do you know how rare that stone is? I think I saw tarot cards too, she pointed. Yeah, and I see a chest full of gold, but it feels a little too good to be true. What if it's a trap? God doesn't want to trap you. He wants to love you and give you everything your heart desires. God is good, said the preacher. What a strange dilemma. Or was it a bribe? Because why give all this away? Why not keep it for themselves? There was a giant crystal boulder positioned in the center of a small Zen garden where pure white sand had been combed into circles around it. But what was this nonsense? And how had these followers come to listen to this man? So I can have anything, even this, said Jane. Take whatever you'd like, said the preacher. Jane shrugged her shoulders, then smiled and made her way over to a table filled with gold, crystals, and precious stones. Her fingers took turns piling gems into her coat. Climbing up the ladder, I studied the word adhesion on the top page. Well, I wasn't going to let one word stump me. Flipping through the pages, I found a detailed agenda and the contents, which included the report number, recipient catalog number, title and subtitle, report date, authors, performing organization name and address, work unit number, contract and grant number, sponsoring agency code, and the astrological sign at which these pages were printed. Of course, someone had printed this historical document far better than I have. No surprise there. And as I turned the page, well, you can't forget about the supplementary notes, or the abstract either. Yes, the abstract. Now it's getting good. I read aloud. The information supplied in this document, Contract of Adhesion 44982 Transition Plan, is based on established universal practices and lawful rights of the land upon which the contract is to be signed, including any current provisions in regards to the universe which may be deemed necessary by the... Wait, what? Sitting on the top step of the ladder, I skipped past the first 50 pages or so and continued to read. The Space and Exploration Committee, documented in the Outer Space Handbook, Series 7, Section 12, paragraphs C through E, beginning on lines 44 through 112, is bound by the endorsement regarding planetary concerns on behalf of the satisfactory approval of current residential leaders guaranteed by proof of human identity regarding the transition discussion of O-828. Solidified by an endorsement of the provisional agenda set on page J29. This contract includes any current celestial bodies and or vessels, including but not limited to nearby astronomic and galactic mass in the nearby vicinity, to bind the contract by... My eyes blinked. I looked back at Jane, who was holding different crystals up to the light, then pocketing them inside her new jacket she just put on. I flipped a couple hundred pages deeper and began to read again, reaffirming the importance of the universal cooperation in the field of exploration, experiences, and use of outer and inner space, including the celestial bodies cited in the Appendix G12 for the resolution on Table M313. We request the committee to fulfill the contract upon deliberation of a specialist bound to its legal subcommittee, in an effort to consider the question and elaboration of the drafted Universal Treaty concerning the global land and its inhabitants through... What the... Yeah, I'm not signing this. The preacher wasn't fazed. Instead, he turned to watch Jane, who was stuffing her pockets with more gems. After she ran out of space, Jane found yet another new coat with golden feathers. "Is this even my style?" yelled Jane. "Never mind, doesn't have any pockets." The preacher nodded. "That gold is as pure as God could craft it." "So you know God?" I asked the preacher. "I hear his words, so I'm his interpreter," said the preacher. "And why's that?" "Because God commands it," he said. "Well, about this contract, I don't even know what any of it says." "But she signed it, and look what she gets. She gets all of God's love," said the preacher. "Look at this," said Jane. "Is this a samurai sword?" "Jane, put it back. We don't need any of this. We don't even know what the contract says." "Has anyone ever read through a whole contract? Like ever?" asked Jane. "One person tried to read it all, but after the 7th day he passed on. Once he realized we had no food here, his body perished rather abruptly. If only he knew that brunch was waiting around the corner. It's too bad because a soul contract doesn't change, therefore no need to sign it on the first day," said the preacher. "So I don't have to sign it." "Oops. Did I say that? Well, you should sign it now, because you won't be back here for a while, so it's best to take what you can while you have the chance. You'll have to sign it before you leave here anyway," said the preacher. "And where are we?" "We're in the middle," said the preacher. "This is the place where the cosmic lords and goddesses rule. Here, their spirits are incarnated into a living body to rule over all things, all lands, and all creatures. The middle ground is the only way that those below can pass on to the place above." "I think I'll wear this. Look at it. Plenty of pockets," said Jane. Jane pulled out a hand-stitched yellow raincoat and slipped it over her other coat to wear with her big red boots. Stepping down from the ladder, I looked the preacher in the eye. "Well, I guess I can't sign it." Jane was beaming with excitement, while her pockets swung side to side with plenty of new stones. "Then God commands it, and God always has his way. I'm sure you'll reconsider soon," said the preacher. "I guess I could sign it," I thought, "but it's about the principle. I'm not afraid or anything, but all those pages, you just wonder what's hidden in there." "Who cares? It's just paper anyways," whispered Jane. In the very back of the trading hall was the only door left for us to take. We followed the preacher when we passed by a stone table as the strangest thing caught my eye. It was a jacket, or a fisherman's robe of sorts, and on its shoulders were 2 deceased horseshoe crabs. Long tails stretched down to the elbows. The garment was blue with white, and I always wanted a coat of my own. "You like that one?" whispered Jane. I shrugged. Jane jumped back to grab it. "And thanks for all your help, Mr. Preacher. I am feeling a bit cold in here. Plus, I've always had a thing for jackets, so I think I'll take this one too." "Of course," said the preacher, not looking back. She tried it on, but it was far too big for her. "I've always wanted to wear someone else's skeleton, just to see how it feels to walk inside their body," said Jane. "Interesting. Never had the thought cross my mind, but at least Jane was smiling." I looked back at the grand room one last time before Jane waved to the followers and the preacher. Heading through the back door, we entered a dark room. After the door closed behind us, Jane handed me the jacket and the lights flickered on. Even more followers were waiting for us in this tiled room. They were adults, I think, or maybe children who never grew into their bodies. All 30 of them were coming towards us when I heard a lock secure the door behind us. 2 metal chairs with straps were already waiting ahead, and it was clear that these 30 or so followers were ready to tie us up. I looked for a way out, and there were at least 12 doors all around us, but it was impossible to know where each one went. Every door was unique and built from exotic wood or metals, with the most noticeable entry being a dark staircase descending down into the darkness. The preacher entered through a yellow side door, while even more followers came in behind him. "Grab that thief. God commands it," said the preacher. Chapter 15. The Doctor's Medicine. The little followers bombarded us when the first little guy dove around my ankles. I tried to shoo him off, but 2 others took hold of my wrists. Before I knew it, I was dragging at least 8 of them across the tiled floor. "You can let go already. I didn't do anything wrong." "God knows what you did," whispered the follower hanging from my neck. Jane and I were forced to sit in the designated chairs, and without warning, they fastened restraints around our arms. "Hey, let us go!" "What is this?" said Jane. "He can't have that coat. He never signed his contract," said the preacher. "Well, it's not his. It's mine," said Jane. "Then why's he wearing it?" said the preacher. "How am I supposed to wear 4 coats at once? It's mine, and he's holding on to it until I get cold next winter. It's all summed up in your contract," said Jane. All of them were considering the idea while the preacher was tapping his toe in disgust. "4 coats," whispered one of the followers. "That is a bit much to wear at once." Said the preacher, rubbing his chin. "Fine, but he needs to sign the contract." "It's a piece of bloody paper, and he's not signing the contract. Now let us go," yelled Jane. The followers looked to the preacher. "Not yet," said the preacher. "Before the game begins, you'll need to be taught the way of God." We were stuck in a waiting area, or maybe a doctor's office, with all different doors around the room. The closest one was painted dark blue with metal spikes over the top, and the other one beside it was fat and red with reeds surrounding it. And then there was a skinny yellow door that seemed a bit too tall. My eye watched a follower exit through the pink door on the left, only to emerge a moment later with a handful of tools through the light blue door on the right. Soon every door was opened and closed, exited and entered, until the followers wheeled a screen in front of us. "And where's everyone else?" "I don't know who you're talking about," said the preacher. "Where are they?" demanded Jane. She was thrashing in her seat, fuming with anger as her stones clanked against the metal armrests. "We're talking about Otto, Manuka, and Levi. Where's the rest of them?" said Jane. "Where's our family?" "Family? I didn't know you were related." The preacher paused. "Yes, well, they're around here somewhere. You'll have a chance to see them, but first we've got a few things on the agenda." A follower is reaching up toward the power button on the screen but couldn't quite reach. "This will help explain things," said the preacher, pressing the power on and then patting his follower on the head. Our reflections were staring back from the blank screen before an electric vision came to life. A film began playing when a man wearing a gold mask came forward on the screen. He was dressed in a tight black membrane and spoke with powerful pronunciation. He was a muscular creature, a man more or less, but maybe more of a wild ape than a human being. "We are here to continue God's legacy," said the man in the gold mask. "Each one of us is called to fulfill a piece of the pyramid's prophecy, and every path depends on each choice. God is watching, and so am I." "God commands it," whispered the followers behind us. This eerie man in the gold mask came forward on his tiptoes. Skinny yet wide, peculiar and robust, his frame stretched the black membrane tight while his pectoral muscles puffed out. "You may be wondering, who am I?" said the man in the gold mask. "I'm the opposite of love, and that's why they named me Evil. I am love backwards." He turned sideways to expose a hefty buttocks and a back that seemed to cover him like a shell. Lengthy arms, much like an overgrown baboon, pointed to us when his backside protruded over his hind legs like a strange mammal that survived extinction. "If you've made it here, then magic awaits you. Together we exist in this moment, caught between the living and dead, and nowhere else," said Evol. "It's been 28 years without a planet to call home, and we're so thankful you summoned us back." The screen switched scenes before gunshots and explosions rattled the projection. Then the man in the gold mask reappeared while a flag floated behind him. The flag was black and white with a red stripe through the middle. The flag then dissolved when the masked man spoke again. "Only God's followers will be rewarded with a gift of everlasting life, but only if they obey the rules and make it to the very end," said Evol. Voices started cheering through the sound beacons around the screen. Evol continued. "As every world must die, the realm of the Great Pyramid remains unscathed, and all those sinners who deny the truth will be at the mercy of those who roam this pyramid, just as God commands it." Bombs and bullets reappeared on the screen behind the projection of Evol. Gunshots rattled our ears, a mushroom cloud demolished a city of buildings, and Jane's body twitched as she reached for my hand. "Follow God, and I promise we will not lead you astray," said Evol. Without notice, the video lost signal before black and white dots crackled across the screen. The speckled checkerboard consumed the video, and there was only static. Everyone in the room cringed from the sound. "What's happening?" said the preacher. "This isn't part of it." He smacked the side of the monitor, but the static grew worse. Frantic energy spread through the room while we covered our ears. Even the followers had fallen to their knees and began chanting to the Lord. "Oh, make it stop," one of them begged. "Please, God, how could you command it?" Suddenly it stopped, and now a new man appeared. He had a gray beard, and he was hiding in a surveillance room while the man in the gold mask was nowhere to be found. "I don't have much time," said the old man. "My name is Ditto, and you must listen." My eyes locked on. Rumors spread about him inside the order, but his pale face had grown tattered from the memory I'd imagined all those years ago. "You were never supposed to find us. We were never supposed to come back. You couldn't understand it, but you must not follow these people. Find your intuition and follow it instead. It knows more than the mind of the wealthiest king. Follow the intuition, and you can be freed from this place," said Ditto. "This isn't right," said the preacher as his arms tried to cover the screen. "God wouldn't command this." "It's okay," I paused. "That's Ditto. They say he's the savior of the—" The preacher turned and pointed a finger between my eyes. "Savior of nothing. That man is a nobody compared to our Lord and God," said the preacher. His eyes were stern, yet all of his followers panicked while they jumped in front of the screen trying to hide the video. "I don't get it. What's happening?" "But we know him," said Jane. "He went missing years ago." Ditto continued from the screen. "It must have taken so much courage to get here, but I must warn you about what lies within. Some of these bodies are possessed. Many are incarnated beings, but all of us are here because we have sinned. You'll never leave this place without risking your life. Only an honest soul can survive." "Survive? What's he talking about?" asked Jane. "Will somebody shut this off?" yelled the preacher. "There's no cable, sir," said one of the followers. "It's a signal broadcast coming from the top down. A forced feed, like all the church and government updates. It's not going off unless the king orders it." "Oh, how could God command it?" begged a follower. "Life in this pyramid acts like an incubator for the cosmic realm. All the people here control what happens out there, both above and below." Ditto paused. "And as for the pain we feel, well, it is here to guide us and show us the way. Sometimes we must endure a good beating to ensure that each lesson stays." "Open up, Ditto," said a voice hidden on the screen. "We know you're in there." "I was very close to liberation. I even saw the very end," said Ditto. "But I made a critical mistake that cost me everything. That is why I'm here with you. They tricked me. Never put I before us. And never again will I make the same mistake." "I'm warning you, Ditto. Open the door and we'll make it easy on you," said the voice somewhere behind him. Tears were running down his face. I couldn't see everything through the follower's fingers, but how did he know that Jane and I were here? Did he know it was us? "He's been stuck for 28 years. He never left," whispered Jane. "My choice has brought me here, and I accept my fate. And soon you will have to make a choice as well. Choose the intuition. It cannot lie," said Ditto. Someone was banging on the door behind him. A battering ram was slamming against the metal as the lock held on. "But why?" I begged. "When I was my brightest, and so was the sun, it wasn't dawn summoning me. We were summoning us as one," said Ditto. "The mistake I made cost me this life, but if you succeed, then my life wasn't wasted." Without warning, the door behind Ditto broke open when men in uniforms rushed to grab him. They didn't look nice to begin with, but it only took another moment until I knew for sure. They broke the first rule called love when they threw him to the ground and beat him with batons. Then they broke the rule again and again while they pounded his face and legs. Blood spattered on the ceiling each time they raised the batons high. Those men beat him badly, again and again and again, until his body couldn't move. Tears streaming, extravagant weeping, and terrible noises echoed between Jane and I, but no one could stop watching. No different than a mashed orange, we watched them drag his body off the screen and out into the hallway. Only the trail of blood was left before they untied Jane and I from the chairs. We fell to the ground, where she buried her head into my side. Wrapping my arms around Jane, I felt an uncontrollable sobbing shake our bodies before a baton struck the screen, turning the video black. All 30 or so of the followers began backtracking towards the doors before they left us alone, one by one. "God commands it," whispered the last follower before leaving through the purple door. The preacher was behind us, standing beside the dark brick staircase leading down. No one else was brave enough to stand near the dark abyss. "How can a loving God cause such agony?" asked Jane. "God doesn't need to explain why everything happens. The wicked will always receive what is due, and all I can say is that we all have a choice, and I choose to serve God. Choose the path of faith, and God will watch over you," said the preacher. "But may I make one suggestion? Never take this staircase down. Only the devil would command such a thing." The abyss rumbled like an empty stomach begging for a meal. The murmuring echoed until the preacher stepped away from it. "And it's best you sign that contract sooner than later. The longer it takes, the worse it could get. Now you can continue on as far as you'd like, but like I said, it's impossible to leave this place without signing it. This is what God commands," said the preacher. He exited in silence through a red door before Jane and I rose thinking the same thing. We have to find our friends and get out. A different door swung open when a group of people dressed in blue gowns came toward us. Their heads, hands, and mouths were covered in this fabric. All I could see were their eyes watching us. Then the largest man lowered himself to a knee before placing a hand on my leg. "I'm a doctor, and doctors make things better," said the man in blue. "I heard what happened. It was terrible. They were hurting ditto." "And it came from this screen?" asked the doctor. "It sure was awful," Jane added. "I've never seen anything like it. And we haven't seen the rest of our friends, I mean our family yet. And—" "Oh, you poor things," interrupted the doctor. "And they made you watch all of it. It must have been so hard." His hand swept off my legs before he reached into his pockets. A distinct clicking sound rattled as he presented us with an orange gift. It was a tiny bottle with pills inside. "This is medicine, and medicine makes things better. Everyone here takes it, and if you want to see your family, then you'll have to take your medicine first," said the doctor. "Do you know where they are?" asked Jane. She was pleading with this man, but how could we trust anyone? And why were they hiding behind these masks? I checked a few of the doctor's eyes, looking for any sign of friendship, but I couldn't see anything behind the blue gowns. "Where's our family? Where are they?" I took a step towards the doctor and clenched my fist in a ball, but he saw it and took a step back. "Easy now. I wouldn't do that if I were you. God doesn't command fighting. Not unless it's needed," said the doctor. "And what about ditto? How could God command that?" "I didn't see what happened, but God is never wrong. I wouldn't question God if I were you," said the doctor. There was only silence between us now. "And I have seen the others. They were here just a few minutes ago. There were 2 men, one black and the other dark brown. Then a woman too, and all of them took their medicine without complaining once. I bet they've explored half the universe by now. They're having so much fun. Well, I'm sure they didn't forget about you, but it's just that, well, the universe inside our pyramid is magnificent. All the levels are," said the doctor. "What levels?" 28 levels to be exact, for the 28 mansions of the moon," said the doctor. "Where?" "It's everywhere. Behind these doors. It's in and out, up and down, as above, so below," said the doctor. "Then what is this place?" asked Jane. "Oh dear, you don't know where you are. They haven't told you. This is it. You're right in between everything you'll ever need, and our king preserved it perfectly, just as God commands," said the doctor. "I'm sure the levels are great, but we need to see our family," said Jane. "First you'll take your medicine," said the doctor, shaking the pill bottle. He opened the cap and set a white pill in my palm. "What is this?" "This one is called happiness, and I have the largest supply. Chew one in the morning and take another after dinner. And if you ever feel really sad, you can take a few more whenever you'd like," said the doctor. He set a pill in Jane's hand too. "Now go on, take your medicine. God commands it," said the doctor. I popped the pill into my mouth and started chewing. Jane did the same. "Now let's give you a quick checkup while you're here. Stand up, my boy," said the doctor. At once, The doctors began poking metallic devices into my ears, nose, mouth, and, "Say ah," said a woman. "Can you feel this?" said another, poking my knee. "Of course." "And let me listen for a minute," said the doctor, reaching up under my shirt and holding a cold metal against my chest. "Well, you're just a dapper lad, aren't you?" "A what?" His hands began feeling my body, starting with my shoulders, down to my legs and in between. It seemed strange to touch another person everywhere, but he said he was a doctor, and that doctors know where to look. The team moved over to Jane before the same tests were done to her. The doctors checked her everywhere, and when they reached in between her pants, Jane slapped his arm away. "Stop it!" yelled Jane. "But we need to check everything," said the doctor. His hands moved too fast, and she didn't catch him this time. The doctor grabbed her crotch. "Oh boy," said the doctor. "You've got a—" Jane slapped him across the face, and his blue mask flew off. The preacher jumped into the room through the tan doorway. "What was that? What happened?" said the preacher. "A unicorn," said the doctor. "The king should be very pleased to hear this." "Is she the one? Is she the virgin?" said the preacher. "Not quite, but this is an important sign," said the doctor. "Then surely the virgin is on her way." "What's your name, missy?" said the preacher. "Miss Mary Jane," she said, "and don't you dare think about touching me again." "It's rare to find one as beautiful as you are," said the doctor. His eyes didn't move off Jane. "Well, this changes things. The king needs to meet you right away," said the preacher. "Oh, how God commands it!" exclaimed the followers as they ran into the room. Suddenly my lips went a bit numb. My body felt light, skin tingling, and I could have been floating away for all I knew, while I observed the followers piling back into the room, clapping and cheering. Was this a big circus? Or a madhouse? It was just like a loony dream, but I couldn't wake up. Wait, what news? What was happening? The preacher escorted Jane toward a door across the room, while the doctor handed me an orange capsule full of medicine. Walking away, a sudden ambush of warm feelings captivated my senses. They escorted me toward the gray door, while every worry vanished. The doctor was right. This medicine was pure happiness, but never had I felt it before. Now one of the followers took hold of my arm and led me to the other side of the room. "Do you like the medicine? Everyone here loves it. I can get you more if you'd like," asked the follower. Their smiles were wooing me, and all of them offered tremendous encouragement while they opened the gray door. I hadn't a clue where we were heading, because all their fingers felt so soft against my skin. Even Jane felt it. She was smiling at me from across the way. I waved back and smiled before checking the label on the orange pill bottle. "Hey, what's palazopram? I think you spelled happiness wrong." "Wait!" Jane yelled across the room. "He's coming with me." "No friends are allowed. God gives us our own path for a reason," said the doctor. I didn't realize how far apart they'd separated us before Jane broke free from the doctors to hug me tight. "He's my brother," said Jane. "Oh, that's right, you're family." "Well, all right," said the preacher. "We should keep family together then. It's what God would command. Come on, my boy, this way." I waved goodbye to the followers, then to all the doctors, and I even waved to anyone else I forgot to meet who piled into the room to bid us farewell. "Your medicine feels nice," I told the doctor. Everyone was clapping and cheering behind us while the doctor held open the purple door. "And if you behave, I'll even let you try the medicine called bliss. It's magnificent," said the doctor.